Okay, so good morning, everybody. Let's start this ARENAS seminar in an online format. It's a pleasure to have here for this seminar that is organized together with CEDID, Center of Research on Democracy and Dictatorship of the Autonomous University of Barcelona, Nicolás Emmanuel Olivares. That is a good friend and is an amazing researcher and teacher coming from Argentina. He's a researcher, Emmanuel, of the CONICET, the most important institution of research of Argentina, and is nowadays doing a postdoctoral research fellow in Girona University in Spain. Emmanuel is also leading a research project nowadays that is very interesting and linked with the topic that we touch today in this seminar. The title of this research project that finished in 2027 is Constitutionalism, Human Rights and Democratic Erosion, and is also a professor of constitutional law and history of the institution and public international law in the Universidad Nacional de La Pampa and the Universidad de Belgrano in Argentina, both of them. So the title of the seminar is How to Study Contemporary Democratic Erosion. We know that is a topic, an issue absolutely interesting, absolutely linked to what we are seeing in Europe and in America in the last year. So I think is really interesting to listen to what Emmanuel will explain to us. The format will be first intervention of Emmanuel around half an hour, more or less, and then we have time for the debate, question, and try to go deeply in this topic. So Emmanuel, it's up to you when you want to start. We are here listening.
Greetings all, good morning. It's a great pleasure for me being here, sharing this morning in a nice dialogue of colleagues, of academic peers, about a topic that I think it's quite current, right? My exposition is going to be connected with a draft of paper that I'm actually working now, as my dear colleague and friend Steven said. The title could be, I don't know, I precise much more time to think about it, something like reflexive approach to contemporary democratic erosion. And I'm going to do that thing that you do when you're going to a nice cinema or watching a nice movie or song, that it's completely spoiler the end of the thing. I think the interdisciplinary approach it's the way, right? I think in social sciences we are committed to a hard work to connect history, sociology, law, philosophy. So I can begin by saying that nowadays we are assisting to a great amount of reactions in our digital networks, right? And reaction is kind of a great word here. Maybe we can connect this with also a contemporary revival of an old school of philosophy that it's called Stoicism. Maybe if we take seriously the words that said Epictetus so many hundreds of years ago, that he said, it's not the facts that affects us, but the reaction we make about them, the most interesting thing. I think reaction is not the same as reflection, and that's the core of my presentation. I think that there are many quite interesting colleagues and papers that are only reacting to a problem and not also reflecting on it. I think that there are marvelous works in terms of empirical political sciences, but I think that we need more of philosophy, we need more of sociology, we need more of history, like the great Stephen here is doing, right? Connecting the dots. I'm thinking in a way we can say in context, not in a vacuum. So my proposal here is just to present some ideas of my work and then have a dialogue. I'm going to be so much brief as brief as I can, presenting my ideas, and I think that the main idea is that reflexivity could be an interesting tool to measure different scenarios. And my worry as a researcher is that there are many confusions in terms and concepts like illiberal, autocracy, populism, fascism. I'm not going to cite all the pages of Stephen work, paying attention that far right wings, it's not the same as saying fascism or neoconservatism. I think that it's a very interesting work here that connects very well with Stephen's work, that it's Natasha Strobel's work. I think it's very interesting what she's doing right now in terms of detaching what it's a conservative regime, a neoconservative regime, an extreme far regime, or a new right regime, or a 2.0 extreme far regime, as maybe Stephen will teach us. This is one interesting point, and my point of departure, the reading departure would be those articles. Maybe you remember that were launched during 2015 in the Journal of Democracy. Maybe it's nowadays the most important academic review source of papers to think in democratic erosion. I was very interested in reading Monk and Fua's work, Roberto Foa and Joshua Monk work. They are political science at the United States. And it's very interesting to see in their works that they are doing just empirical political science, and they are choosing defining democracy by connecting the dots with the concept of Robert Dahl's polyarchy concept. But as all we know, Robert Dahl distinguishes an ideal dimension and a non-ideal dimension, if you use John Rawls' terminology right here, no, in the public laws, this interesting book. The thing is that democracy is not the same as a polyarchy. A polyarchy is connected with an actual regime, a real thing, and democracy, it's like a spirit, an objective, an ideal thought that we have. So maybe it's not democracy what is in crisis, but a more specific way of defining a polyarchy, or maybe the methodological tools that some political scientists are actually using to measure this problem. After reading deeply Munch and Foa's work and other political science like Luncan, Way, Levitsky, Siblat, and this interesting literature, you can go there and see that they are explaining to us that we are more or less in a time of democratic erosion. But after saying this, they are not qualifying or defining in more precise terms if democratic erosion is the same as having a deconsolidated regime, or is not the same as a democratic regression. So I've been working in some papers of academics like Emilio Peluso and Antonio Diaz in Brazil or Roberto Gargarella in Argentina, that they are saying that it's not the same talking about democratic erosion, deconsolidation, or regression. So I think this is one of my main points, and maybe after sharing this draft of paper in the future, we can share some thoughts about it. But I think the most interesting thing here is sharing thoughts between historians, sociologists, uh, lawmakers, and philosophers to think this intersubject thing. I think democratic erosion is quite a complex thing, and maybe we can interpret better what is happening right now if we think together with them and not departing these dimensions, right? So my proposal here is uh, uh, explicitating three kind of hypotheses. The first hypothesis is in order to really understand what is going on with democracies right now, we must say yes or no to the pluralistic perspective on democracy. Are we continuing analyzing Robert Dahl's work, or are we going to analyze, scrutinize other normative perspectives on democracy, like discursive perspective, I don't know, uh, also deliberate democracy perspectives, and Republican perspectives on democracy. I think there are so many ways defining democracy, and I really actually don't understand. We are obsessed with defining democracy just in terms of an electoral democracy. It's kind of hard for a political philosopher to read every paper in political science saying democracy is elections, public opinion, some kind of individual freedoms, and that's just all, folks. I think democracy is quite more than that, and it's not my humble opinion. It's the opinion of the last 50 years for so many thinkers, that I think the most humble way is to pay attention to just not political and empirical political scientists, but also to sociologists, discourse analysis, and historians. So when you take Stephen's work, when you take Natasha Strobel's work, you find that it's in the very core of their proposal a conceptual preoccupation, but not in a semantic way, not in terms of establishing a new grammar, but in a more political way. Stephen explicitly says, in order to understand our reality, we must be able to define it. So defining a thing, it's kind of a psychological status. Quite interesting thing. The ability to put a name on a thing, it's quite a work. It's a huge work. So I think that social analysts, we must connect the dots in this sense. So maybe the most interesting thing to say is to pay much more attention on the normative definition of our term democracy. And I think that if we continue confusing the terms, as Stephen says, confusing fascism with neoconservatism, with new expressions of these rights movements, we are in the wrong way. But also, if you have a great confusion in detecting different scenarios, right? I think that maybe we are witnessing three different scenarios. For me, democratic erosion, democratic deconsolidation, and democratic regression are three different things. And maybe this could be the thing that it's properly said in my draft of paper, and the rest is just a dialogue with very interesting colleagues. But the thing is, some persons like Margaret Archer, that is a sociologist from the UK, says that if you want to understand what is happening in in a great change in a society, you should pay attention to the work that the person is doing inwards and not outwards. So you must pay attention to her or his thoughts. So reflexivity, the kind of way that I was saying at Third Place, not just reacting, not just posting a like or a dislike emoji to a video, an image, or a phrase. It's much more complex. So she says that um, we can capture a very complex picture, that it's meta-reflexivity, fractal reflexivity, inner reflexivity, communicative reflexivity. So I'm not going to borrow you with so many terms and definitions, but I think that it's very interesting that a great sociologist is paying attention to this very precise phenomenon in terms of reflexivity. Then you go to political philosophy and says, okay, what's the paradigmatic way of defining democracy nowadays? Okay, I know, one can say. It's Robert Dahl polyarchy. No, of course it's not. It's deliberate democracy. For the last 35 or 40 years, deliberate democracy is the genuinely paradigm in defining what is democracy for us. Every kind of author in political science or social sciences that wants to say one thing to democracy today must say something about argumentation, dialogue, or deliberation. So here's the thing: deliberate democracy is the really new paradigm in thinking the term of democracy. So why are we going to do the maths connecting with Robert Dahl's polyarchy if we are having a new conceptual technology? So my proposal is, how about think about democratic erosion, democratic deconsolidation, and democratic regression from the reflexive deliberate perspective. So that's my proposal in a line. Uh, um, and that's the thing. And I think that the works of Stephen, the works of Natasha Strobel, and there are many other works contribute to this line of thought, because when we are defining what is a democracy, we're not just paying attention to the electoral dimension of democracy. Maybe you are listening here my methodological tools coming from conceptual political history, from Quen Skinner, Reinhard Forster, also from Pierre Ossambachon. I think that it's very interesting to give a chance to think this actual phenomenon from a very different angle, from a very different concept of democracy. And why not thinking this whole thing from the actual paradigm of what is a democracy, the concept of democracy. I'm not saying a polyarchy, yeah. I'm not saying a real regime. I'm saying democracy as an ideal. So for being also more brief, my proposal is, as I said, differentiating these three scenarios, that it's democratic erosion, democratic deconsolidation, and democratic regression. For my surprise, reading Gargarella, reading Antonio Diaz in Brazil, reading Emilio Peluso Nedermeyer, also in Brazil, they are just doing that. And they are saying more or less what is going to be said right here. If you have a public opinion that it's truly contaminated with some new rights ideas, some corrosive perspective about what politics is, maybe you are in a democratic erosion scenario, but you're not in a scenario where laws or a constitution is passed by these arguments. So you are not in a scenario where laws are justified by new right wings or far right wings arguments. So maybe Spain nowadays is in a democratic erosion scenario because there is a party, maybe a bunch of parties that are saying more or less that we need to cut some rights, uh, more than social rights, political rights, that it's more dangerous for me. I think when public opinion, I'm thinking in Jürgen Habermas two-track model, right? Public opinion and juridical dimension of the law. So when public opinion is based on this kind of arguments, but you're not having a government that is ruled by these arguments, we are maybe in a democratic erosion scenario. Then the next step, the next corroded step would be living in a country where your government actually passes laws, infraconstitutional laws, using these kind of arguments. So saying women's or LGBTQIA plus subjects have or don't have these rights according to this perspective on politics, really? This far-right perspective on politics, or 2.0 far-right perspective on politics, right? So it's a very different scenario having a law pass on these kind of arguments, legal arguments, that not being in this scenario, than just having a party, a political party, that it's saying that aloud in a parliament. And the third scenario, I think it's quite different, and the most dangerous one is when you are having a complete reform of the state in terms of a constitutional reform of the state, changing also the name of a state. You know that recently, in 2023, the European Parliament took the voice and said there is a country of us that took the word republic, yeah, to its very own name. Taking apart the term republic from a state is, I think, in political philosophical terms, is changing not only one element of the state, changing not only the governmental dimension of the state, but changing the whole state. So I think we are witnessing in this kind of regressive democratic scenarios changes not only of parties, social movements, and arguments, but also changes of state forms. I think we are witnessing, in some cases, what might be called a desrepublicanization process, that it's going backwards against social justice and political justice, that are the main pillars of a very well-known book of Philip Pettit, Republicanism, that says that political justice and social justice are these lights that spreads some reasons for us in a republican state. So I think more or less this is my proposal. And finally, to connect the dots also with political discourse analysis, I think it's very interesting what it's doing right now. Audrey Alejandro is a very interesting researcher that is working in terms of connecting reflexivity with not just, as Margaret Archer does, inner dialogues, but social dialogues. She's saying that we must take into account a reflexive perspective, not just only due to our object of study, but also as subjects of study, right? As researchers. She's saying that we must recapture the idea of praxis that connects much better what is a theoretical perspective with a practical perspective. That is more or less what we are having now. Begin to think in terms of praxis, right? In these philosophical terms. It's very interesting to connect what Archer says, what Alejandro says, and finally, just a word about delivery democracy. I've been working on it for, I don't know, 15 years from now. There's a very well-known professor that is Robert Gooding, that is from, I don't know, 20 years, 22, 23 years, saying that reflexive democracy and its principles, it's a better way to define democracy. So I think maybe it's a way to have a brief presentation of my thoughts. I think it's not the most analytical way, but I think it's better to have a nice dialogue here. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Emmanuel, for this intervention and to try to put on the table different concept, different way of studying, and I think is really interesting. And I think there's a lot of well, issue, concept, things to talk about. So maybe well, we just opened the space for and time for question or consideration, and I will start with two questions that are well related. The first one is about the three scenarios that you pointed out. If I'm not wrong, and I think it will be interesting for everybody to enter a bit more in this. You say that the three scenario is, for example, well, democratic erosion is the first scenario. The second one is the democratic deconsolidation, and the third one is the democratic regression. You put like an example of the first scenario, democratic erosion, for example, Spain nowadays, where there is not a far right or authoritarian government, but there is parties in the opposition that they are saying or propose some cut of different kind of rights. The democratic deconsolidation is with a government, well, a party or more party, a coalition in the government that start to apply these cuts or applying laws. And so we are in democratic deconsolidation. I think here maybe because you put the example of Spain in the first case, the second one could be US, if I'm not wrong, no? And the third case so is democratic regression with a government that is changing the constitution, also changing the name of the country. So it's Hungary, I imagine, no? So this is the third scenario. So it's like a different step. The erosion is only the first step that is not exactly from the government, but idea and proposal existing in the political party system or in the society, while the other two, deconsolidation and regression, is from the government, from the state. Is right. So maybe if you can go enter a bit more there, I think is a crucial point. And the second question that is more related to the concept of democracy, I know that we cannot create a new European project, or not only European, to study what is democracy. And I think we need maybe 50 years to find an answer where we can agree. But apart of that, I think here, talking also maybe more to democratic erosion. So this first scenario, this first step is important, to going back to a concept coined by a British political scientist, Colin Crouch, 20 years ago, that is post-democracy. Because here I think what maybe could be interesting that you say something about is if, in your opinion, taking account that democracy and polyarchy is not the same, what you just say, but in any case, the idea of democracy and the concept of democracy more or less accepted worldwide in the last 40 years changed a bit compared to the period before the victory of neoliberalism, let's say in this way. So the democracy is not only some kind of rules, fair and free election, but there is also, a fight against inequalities and a fight for social justice. Finally, the concept of post-democracy explain in some way this point, because democratic country where big enterprise have a lot of power and the social inequalities grown continuously. No, so I don't know if you agree from that. If you think that the concept of post-democracy could be interesting, and how neoliberalism could be interesting in your research to understanding also how can we study and how can we understand this erosion first, but also finally the consolidation of regression. I don't know if it's clear, but
yeah,
okay, perfect.
Thank you so much, clear sweater. The first one, okay, I'm just gonna read a little bit of it to clarify my point. Of course, you are right. I'm thinking in Spain, in Argentina, United States, and then in Hungary, and maybe in Poland. I don't know, but in Hungary, I'm thinking the scenarios go just like that. Firstly, when the political discourses of citizens show a certain increasing deterioration of the image that the democratic regime has, we can detect a possible scenario of democratic erosion. Secondly, if this distrust overcomes the barrier of the public space of citizens' opinion and penetrates the discourses offered by representatives in the legal spaces of the constituted political powers, implementing norms, institutions, or legal measures that limit democracy, we will be facing a possible deconsolidation scenario. And then thirdly, if on the basis of these political discourses prone to a certain authoritarianism norms, institutional measures were effectively implemented, then we will witness a democratic regression if there is a constitutional reform, attentive to which the mutation of the regime will occur in terms of a mutation of a state and not just in terms of a change of government. Thus, these three scenarios connect perfect, I think, with what BDEM researchers are doing right now in terms of marking different changes that are coming from liberal democracy to electoral democracy to electoral autocracy and close autocracy. I think that Stephen captures these changes also in his recent books. And it's very interesting that we are having this track system to identify different regimes, that we are not having this technology, this conceptual technology 10 years ago. So we are now having, I think I'm pretty sure we are having a better technology to identify these different forms, as we were in the 90s, identify different scenarios for transitions to democracy, or if there is a scenario in where democracy is consolidated or no. But here's the thing: when you connect these different literatures, democracy's transitions, democracy's consolidation, and deconsolidation, in the third wheel, in the third dimension, many authors they pretend to completely differentiate their methodology forms from those years ago. And it's not true, because they are using the same concept of polyarchy of Robert Dawes, and they are doing a very bad reading of Robert Dawes. Robert Dawes never said democracy is polyarchy. Robert Dawes says there's a polyarchy and there's democracy. If you want an idea, just pray for democracy. If you want to win this war, make things happen, you are in a polyarchy. Much more or less is Robert Dawes' differentiated picture that combines perfectly with John Rawls' perspective in a theory of justice of having a normative dimension and a non-ideal normative dimension. So it's more or less the standard of the late 70s. And it's also the point that you, Steven, are marking in the changes from the Italian literature to signing the word liberal, liberalian, libertarian, etc. Adjectives to democracy. So the nowadays changes, you are dating this in the last 70s in some of your works. And I think it's very interesting that the most recent literature is not capturing this complex perspective on roles, and many authors, I cited here, Archer, Alejandro, Gargarella, Diaz, Peluso, any if you want, you can read it, and they are saying the same as Steven is saying. If you're not defining with precision our concepts, we are not going to understand our reality. So I think these three scenarios are taking much more attention to a dimension that is not very well captured by empirical political science, that it's not less than the law. So when you have a government that is binded to a juridical project, you are saying that you have a format, a type of government, and you are saying that if this is eroded, I think you are in a deconsolidated scenario. And then when you are mutating your constitutional, you're going to a different kind of state. I'm saying this because in a very interesting study, Emílio Peluso Nedermeyer, that it's a constitutionalist from Brazil, from Minas Gerais, Brazil, a very friend of mine, has studied how the dictatorship in Brazil consolidate their weapons, their pillars, to stay more in power than in the case of Argentina or Uruguay. Yes, so the results for Emilio are the change. The key lock is constitutional identity. He's saying that when a country modifies in a deeply way their constitutional identity, they are not just changing a government, or it's not that we are witnessing a change in government, but a change of the whole state. This connects with your final remark about liberalism, illiberalism. I think Larell biography, the Oxford Handbook for Illiberal Democracy, I think it's 2024. It's quite interesting. I share some thoughts here with Steven about the path that we must go. I think if we continue saying that all is fascism, all is populism, or nowadays that many colleagues are saying all is illiberalism, we are in the wrong way, because the most important thing is detecting things in reality. So a very wise man taught me, I don't know, 30 years ago, something like that. He said to me, if you want to have a good theory, you have to put value on two things. You have to have an explanatory capacity. You must have a capacity to explain reality. If you can't explain reality, you are just completely screwed. And if you have the capacity to explain reality, you are not even near to change it. So you have to employ a tool to transform reality. So I think if we continue analyzing our reality in terms of a one confusing scenario, everything is a crisis of democracy, right? Everything is crisis, everything is erosion. I think it's not. And polyarchy is going to be the last and ultimate tool for assessing our realities. We are not having a very powerful theoretical perspective, and we are not having the capacity of transform reality. Why I'm saying transform reality? Because reality right here, right now, is occurring in a digital space, and new rights movements are flourishing in digital space. So how are we going to capture this kind of techno discourses is one of the main questions of Marianne Pavot, great researchers in discourse analysis that is capturing not only the words, the tags, but also the frames. Now we are witnessing a thing, a bubble that says chat, another work with the head, and a body that says people, and to participate with the hand, right? These tools, these very specific tools, are modifying the way we are interacting. So this is a frame for our techno discourses, right? So if we don't capture this fluid space, digital spaces, I think we are not capturing at all this new reality. I think in the future, discourse critical analysis, or as Audrey Alejandro explains, reflexive discourse analysis is the base for historians, for political philosophers to understand what is really happening. Why far right movement is getting more votes using these digital tools than, I don't know, a typical welfare party or a typical social justice party, as we can say in South America. I think it's very interesting what you're saying in your books, and these mermaids that are singing the word fascism, populism, illiberalism doesn't attract me at all. I think that we must be kept as Ulysses did and be attached to the muscle, because these words maybe offer us much more little than we expect, and the scenarios are much more complex. And finally, to properly respond to your questions, I think that the last, I don't know if you know it, if you read it, it's not for being Argentina, it's not that, but Guillermo O'Donnell, I don't know if you ever read a book of Juan Lins, Arturo Valenzuela, or Guillermo O'Donnell book. These kind of guys, at the end of the very great career, they were employing, I don't know, 50 years to reread their own papers and say, oh my gosh, we are so bad, we are doing so bad these things, this 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 path, this science in a track that completely determines the passes that we can do. It's very bad. It's not what a scientist must do. The last Guillermo O'Donnell said that in terms of democratic transitions, democratic consolidation. So I think it's a very interesting thing that in Strobel, Stephen, Audrey Alejandro, Robert Gooding walks, we are not finding a path that it's completely determined. So if you are in phase one, if we are saying, if you are in a democratic erosion scenario, you're inevitably in a future in a deconsolidated or democratic regression scenario. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we must avoid saying that, because reality is much more complex. But I think it's a very interesting way to mark what empirical political scientists of BDM are saying, that we are passing from liberal democracy to electoral democracy, electoral autocracy, and close autocracy. I think that my proposal is much more humble. I don't need to define what it's liberal democracy, electoral democracy, open democracy, closed democracy. I just need to define what is going on the public opinion, what is going on the government, and what is going on in a constitutional process. And I think it's much more simpler to capture in including a discourse analysis in the press. So nowadays I'm doing a postdoctoral research project on discourse analysis and democratic erosion in Brazil and in Argentina, and it's very clear that the tags are saying much more or less that there's a constitutional identity that is changing. So I expect to respond well to your questions.
Well, thank you very much, Emmanuel. I don't know if there is some other question. Please jump in if you want to ask something.
If I may. So thank you, very interesting seminar. And I wanted to ask a really straightforward question. Maybe you've already explained it, but I would like to delve a little bit more on it. And it's about also erosion and how it starts happening. So what leads to the first steps of erosion? It's social, political, specific context, is because of extremist narratives maybe that help also start eroding, a combination. So if you could maybe develop a little bit more about that.
Okay, thank you so much, Sergi. I think that in my proposal, erosion comes with a juridical dimension. I think that erosion comes when you are on your mood to say something quite inappropriate to another person in the parliament, and in the next day nothing happened, right? And in the next day you are having a party, a political party that is saying, oh, Sergi is right, everything that Sergi says must be in the constitution. So I think that freedom of speech is one of the keystones here. And it's very clear the case that this starts to mutate to other more complex things. So picture this: in the 1920s of the 2023 December in Argentina, we are about to start a new political process, right? And then in that moment, they're just sayings at the press, words, expressions, political expressions in an arena, in social networks. Then there will start to be official government communications that they are using more or less this kind of expressions, departing from the same kind of grammar. Nowadays, we are having laws passed by juridical exposition of motives, of reasons, based on this same kind of semantics and grammar. So the next step will be, of course, proposing a change in a fundamental law, and in all the cases that are documented, like Brazil, Hungary, United States, the first step of the final step is putting your eyes on judicial power. So when you are having so many lawfare cases, this could be also the beginning of the end. Saying that, for Antonio Diaz in Brazil, he was saying this in 2016. So after the situation that Dilma Rousseff lived in Brazil, he said that when you're having a democratic deconsolidation, what you are having is much more or less public opinion mixed up with some kind of institutional measures. It's not the same, say, institutional measures that passing a law, and passing a law or reforming the constitution is much more dangerous. He was saying that, not expecting to change anything. And if you want to express an hypothesis of why Brazil turned or returned, or is, as many colleagues, very renowned colleagues in Brazil saying, they are living a transition, a new transition to a new kind of democracy from the last government. You can say that because the Supreme in Brazil changed their opinion about the political process that was going on. The Supreme took part and posed some obstacles to public political opinions and some words that affect different kind of groups in Brazil. So I think if you are liking or not, judicial powers are part of the keystones of this kind of process. Also, I think that when you are tracing a line, so I'm going to repeat what Bidem scholar said, no? Liberal democracy, then electoral democracy, then electoral autocracy, then you have a close autocracy, right? But I always think, what about the zero phase before a liberal democracy? Are we truly living in a liberal democracy? And I think the book published recently and republished recently by Stephen is saying no, not at all, or we are not in a complete liberal democracy. I think the way that we are defining liberalism connects with this, but there are many problems here because it's not the same illiberalism that non-liberal governments than popular non-liberal governments, and this is studied from, I don't know, the 80s to now. There are footnotes of many political philosophic work that are saying it's not the same having a popular government that it's not liberal, that having a popular government that is illiberal, or having a liberal government that it's not popular. So this kind of complex classification has been made up, and I think we must connect our recent literature with the 80s, with have been studied in the 80s and the 90s, as Stephen does in terms of history. Stephen doesn't begin their book saying, okay, from 2016 to now, no. He's thinking 30, 40, maybe 50 years ago after saying this is fascism or it's not fascism at all. So why not doing the same thing in terms of liberalism, illiberalism, or populism, right? And then you have many complex scenarios like in South America, because in a paper of mine I've been studied that we have different kind of populism governments, and I think the idea of illiberalism, populism, and fascism, it's more kind of less confusing our possibilities to understand the reality. Is just that, it will be very interesting to say that guilty on them, they are all populist leaders and so on. But I think this is a kind of argumentation that is not scientific at all. I think science must prove things, must give proofs to things, and if we are in mathematics, we must know a little bit of physics and chemistry, maybe. And if we are saying something about history, maybe we must know something of empirical political studies and maybe something of political philosophy. So yes, I think Anna is here.
Yeah, only if I may, just before, because it's very
Please.
related.
Yeah. It was a subsequent question. I was waiting. Sorry.
No, but it's 30 seconds. That what you pointed out, Emmanuel, I think the debate that is existing since the 80s about which kind of political system is Israel is very interesting, because there's someone that say Israel, and I'm not talking about the last 2 years, but since the 80s or the 90s or also before, is a liberal democracy. Someone else says that is a liberal system but not democratic. Others say that is an ethnic democracy but not liberal. And also there's different kind. There's an interesting debate about that finally touch the concept and the point that you talked about before. So Anayara, when you want, please. Thank you.
Maybe Emmanuel wants to answer to that because or react. No.
Thanks to the comment of Steven.
It's super interesting. Really, thank you so much. I was wondering several things, particularly on the basis of the first question of Steven about where do we put somehow the starting point, what kind of democracy, and so on. One question is, how does your framework relate to agonistics in general, and pluralism of voices, and you know, the space of conflict for a democratic space, and for its definition itself as a, you know, as a system. Then as well, because we have seen quite many different uses of the word democracy in the last years, corresponding to many very interesting you know, definitions of systems. How, if we were positioning ourselves in other kind of democracies, if your framework could be even towards a positive kind of frame. So, you know, if certain democracies were eroding or deconsolidating or having regression, of that could bring us to certain positive point, because depending on where we put what democracy is and what are the values that we want to include, or the principles that we want to include, you know, even a regression could be an interesting or even a desirable point. And yeah, well, I will leave it there because I would like to hear yours. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, and yeah, quite interesting things. You are touching two interesting points of my draft paper. The first one, it gets on pluralism, right? I think the most interesting way to defining, for example, illiberalism, is thinking of a perspective that goes against pluralism. So if we are having to define this kind of perspective, soft ideologies, I don't know, in terms of Laurel, for example, I think that for my part, liberal democracy could be defined in a very negative way, constraining to its denial with certain fundamental political principles. And I think that many normative conceptions of democracy have a consensus with the frame of liberal democracy in terms of on these three things that I'm going to say. In the first place, a pluralist perspective, respecting your opinion in terms of religion, moral, are you going to do with your body or not? So there are many normative conceptions of democracy. They are not liberal at all, but they are sharing this value. Another sharing value is connected with the idea of the principle of the majority. So saying something in terms of democracy is connected not only with voting, but it has to be connected with one person, one vote. And this is going to a phase in where some gurus of the right-wing spheres are saying that we are not needing one person, one vote principle at all. So this is going against the very principle of the majority rule. So this is kind of dangerous. And the third thing is much connected with political regimes. I think that when you're getting with pluralism and you are getting with majority principle, you are also getting with parliamentarism. I think it's not an exception in history that when there are so many critics to parliaments, there are a constant evolution to a more presidential way. See, so I think that hyper-presidentialism has been so much studied, and I think that we are assisting to a presidentialization of the politics from the 90s to here. And I think that this anti-pluralistic perspective is in the core of these new rights expressions. And to say a word about how about having another normative conception of democracy, I would say perfect. Better for my work, because if we can prove that it's a change in public opinion, if we can prove there is a change in the legal arguments in why we are passing or not passing these laws on, or if we can prove there is a constitutional reform that it's slightly or very rooted, or has very rooted connections with extreme rights, new rights, 2.0 new rights, or far rights. So I have proved my point. I think it's quite better to depart from a reflexive deliberate perspective, because I say something like that in this draft of paper, that we're capturing a argumentative perspective for Laclau and Mouffe, for Dole, for many thinkers, discourse analysis is just like an appendix to the real thing, to the real power. And I don't think what is just going out when a teenager is capturing a phrase and it's putting in a social network, and then this phrase is going to be accepted or rejected for a group, and then it's going to have a movement. Then you're having a very complex discursive scenario that comes from a discursive dimension. So I think that reflexive deliberate democracy is well prepared, not prepared by me, prepared by brilliant persons in the last 40, 50 years. And I don't understand why in the field of history, in the field of sociology, they are taking care these precious works from the last 40 and 50 years, and in the field of political empirical science, they are saying we are departing from these persons and we are coming from zero. This is the proposal of Munch and Foa, having a new paradigm. So this is my criticism to them. I expect to respond to your questions.
Thank you. I really wanted to hear your perspective. So yeah, thank you
so much. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. I think we finished more or less our time. There's a lot of things to talk about. It's a big topic, and unfortunately, I think we will need to talk more about that in the next few years. So will be very interesting to know also the research of Emmanuel. So let's keep in touch. Let's maintain informed about what you are studying and what are the result of your project. And hopefully we have other occasion to meet up in person or online, also in the frame of ARENAS research project.
Thank you so much, Steven, and dear colleagues, for your time.
Well, thanks to everybody, and keep in touch, and see you soon, and have a nice summer.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.